You just got back from the Middle East, and tell us about how you see the role of so-called citizen journalism and the uprising and the dynamics that are going on there.
What struck me, I think, most about what I had been seeing there is how I actually had been experiencing what was the entire revolution in Tahrir Square, for instance. Most of what I had been seeing was little clips of video, not full big reports. I didn't see many documentaries about it. I wasn't sort of watching newscasts about it. But what I was getting was through tweets and through Facebook entries, little bits of video on things like Bambuser or TwitVid. And even today as we talk, what's happening in Syria is really coming to us in these small little clips that are coming from people on the ground with smartphones. And I think that is pretty fascinating to me. We are wringing our hands over in journalism here about the role of the citizen journalist and whether a person who wants to have a career as a journalist can actually be paid to be a journalist if everybody's got cameras and they're all participating. But there, I think, it's really particularly vital. I mean, think about all this imagery we see. A lot of it's been captured by little smartphones or small cameras. And it's young people on the ground there that are documenting the events that are actually driving the story. And I think that's pretty fascinating.
Is there a bigger message or a bigger sort of takeaway about citizen journalism and the Arab Spring? Do you see any sort of significance around the use of UGC video in the Arab Spring? What it might mean?
Well, there's two different things I'm thinking about. UGC video basically is driving us in the Western world outside to see what's happening inside. But most people in Egypt aren't watching this stuff. They don't have access to it. So what you have is, we're getting the message out here, and it's all sort of being spread outside. But inside, and so there are people who are trying to take what's being reported there and actually find ways inside Egypt to make people see it more. And there's an interesting group called Askar Kazabun. And Kazabun means liars, and so the military liars. And it was a headline on one of the newspapers, Kazabun, with a picture of state security actually committing a terrible act. And what they've been doing is taking some of this user-generated content, the YouTube videos that are out there that show things that are happening on the ground, because state media and things like that are presenting one side of a story and the other side isn't being seen. And so people in villages who don't have access to internet or aren't watching television programs that are showing these sorts of things like Al Jazeera or whatever, don't believe that the army's been doing these things. And I think it's just these troublemakers downtown. And so what they've been doing is taking a projector and taking these videos to villages and projecting and showing them. So it's sort of a radical way to sort of push the media out there. And then there's another television network that started basically out of January 25th called 25 TV. And what they're doing is trying to harness the power of those young people who have been telling their story, bring them in and create a television program, a television network that has about 8 hours of programming a day that gets that energy of them and helps them tell the story to the country over a satellite television network. And they're making pretty good strides. They've been going out and doing 250 Vox Pop interviews a day, asking the same question of people out in the countryside and throughout different parts of Cairo and Egypt, and trying to get a cross-section of Egyptians, talking about politics and things like that. And then they cut that down to a half-hour program. So there is that kind of excitement there. Now, whether that can continue on and how can you pay for that enterprise? Most of the satellite programs are started by very wealthy people over there. This one isn't, and they're trying to figure out ways to make that a viable enterprise and keep that going. And there's one other thing I wanted to talk about. There's a good friend of mine who's a former video journalist at the New York Times, Jigar Mehta, and his partner Yasmin El-Ayat, who's Egyptian-American, had studied at NYU, have created something. They were creating a crowdsourced documentary about the first 18 days in Egypt, called 18 Days in Egypt. And the idea is that tagging all this video that's coming in and finding a way to make sense of it and tell a story sort of about a given moment or a given event. And so they developed this platform to allow that stuff to sort of be brought in and for people to sort of play around with it and tell their stories. Well, now they've got a bunch of fellows on the ground in Egypt recording things and building on this platform. They're out there on the ground documenting things and telling these stories in this interesting platform that pulls in tweets and Facebook status updates and video pieces and photographs and puts it in a linear way, a little package, little moment by moment, that you can tell a little slice of a story that is part of this sort of huge story that's happening all around them.
جمعة الغضب وسط غاز مثير للدموع.
اليوم ال 18 لما مبارك اتنحى احتفلت وسجلت احتفالات الشعب.